Thank you. Hi. How is this? I feel quite fragile. Okay. Well, we're talking about sports, so we're just going to keep doing it.
Yeah, exactly. So if anybody wants to jump in on which franchise moved where, that was our conversation for the last 20 minutes. Thank you so much for coming. This is an incredible honor for me. You're my favorite cookbook author. I'm not going to lie about that. I did want to ask one question. I have quoted you a number of times, and I really, really hope this isn't a faux pas, that this wasn't you who said this, but I'm pretty sure it was. It was a lecture of yours 20 years ago in Providence, Rhode Island, and you were talking about recipes. And you told the audience, it was mostly cooking professionals, that if a recipe calls for a quarter teaspoon of any spice and you don't have it, don't worry about it.
I mean, that seems pretty, I like that. Whether I said it or not, I buy it.
Good. Well, I'm crediting you. So thank you for that, because I have quoted that, and people are like, well, do I need to run out and get, cardamom? I was like, you're fine, just a little more
sort
salt.
Of I think the backup rule there should be that you can't do it too many times in the same recipe.
It's true. But that seems fair. Absolutely. So, I always like to ask, where did you grow up, and what was sort of the culinary path you took to get to this point? And please, if you want to speak for like 40 minutes, that would be great, and I would be done.
So I grew up in Manhattan. I grew up in a housing project that was built right after World War II. Was 40% Jewish, 40% Irish Catholic, and 20% other. The other was like WASP. It was officially segregated by the ownership to its later, well, not to its shame, but to its embarrassment, I guess. And the Irish and the Jews didn't talk to each other, and the WASPs were sort of insignificant. So it was essentially a Jewish neighborhood as far as I was concerned. And my mother was you would think I would have a phrase for this by now, because I say something like this a lot, but she was an indifferent but very obligated cook. She really didn't, she has a much better palate now. She's 92. She has a much better palate now than she did when she was a young woman. She just wasn't that interested in food, and I won't go too far down this road, but I do think she had an interesting career during World War II, and I do think she was a little resentful at suddenly finding herself at home raising children and cooking and cleaning, and who could blame her? But she did cook every night, and for that, I thank her, because that was a good example. But we weren't a family of what would now be called foodies by any means, and the food was quite ordinary and traditional. However, I lived in Manhattan, which was, and I lived a mile from the UN, and every delegation from everywhere in the world had to have restaurants, because their people had to have some place to go eat. I mean, there weren't, Koreans didn't come to the UN and go eat pizza. They wanted Korean food. So I think in the 60s, my friends and I were unusual in that we were going out for like Korean food, Indonesian food, Japanese food, Spanish food, had all of that stuff before I even left home. And then I left home and went to Massachusetts, where the food was abysmal. And I went to college, which, is partly designed to starve you to death, at least it was. And so my second year, I got an apartment and I started cooking out of self-defense. And that year, my roommate was a short order cook. And the year after, my roommates were people who grew up in families where everybody cooked and they knew how to use cookbooks, and I did that. And the year after that, I lived by myself and I just started working my way through cookbooks. And in fact, I had a cookbook from this place called House of India in Chicago. And like from the 70s, does anyone remember this? But it was some like So I still have that book. But so that was my first Indian cookbook, and I started cooking Indian food in 1970, 71, and other stuff too, and I just kind of worked my way through things over the years, and eventually I was a writer, and no one was interested in anything I was writing about. And then eventually I started writing about food, and people were interested in what I was writing about. I don't know how that happened, but there are more stories, but that was probably 5 minutes, which is long enough. You have to work here.
I know. Thank you. Son of, that was really the only question
I could go 40 minutes.
No problem. It's funny. I have a real similar background as well. Say my mother grew up in the Upper West Side of New York, got married. Unfortunately, we moved to Deerfield, Illinois. So in the 60s, so the actual exposure to those kinds of foods were Don the Cantonese chef every Sunday night, and that was as exotic as it got. So what's your process when you're writing a recipe, when you're putting together a book? Like, do you ever give up on a recipe?
I mean, the recipes are not the hard part of a book. The hard part of these books, and these are big books. I mean, this is a slimmed down how to cook everything with a mere 1,000 recipes. 4 years ago, I did this book called How to Cook Everything Fast, and it got out of control, and it's like 5 inches thick. I looked at it the other day. I was like, they were getting bigger. So now we're putting in photography and slimming them down. We're modernizing, we're streamlining. But the challenging part of putting together a cookbook, especially, well, no, it's not especially. I was going to say especially when you've done a lot of them, but it's not true. It was always true. The challenging thing is that it's a management project, and your option is all the recipes in the world. You start with all the possible recipes, and you have to think, well, what makes sense for this book, for me, at this time, for this audience, given who I am, blah, 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 blah. And a related question, which you may or may not have, but a related question is, why do a grilling book? Why me? Why now? And it's a totally fair question, but the answer seems to be, I feel that cookbooks don't get enough cred as being books. And I'm not saying that they're literature, they're not literature, but what they share in common with other books is that they're of a time, they're of a place, they're of an author. And, you wouldn't want a computer-generated, algorithmically generated well, you have an algorithmically generated cookbook. It's called the internet. And you buy cookbooks anyway, and you buy cookbooks because they have personality. And they have personality because I literally make the choice of selections of first taking all the recipes that I know to exist and making a list of my favorites for this book, and then messing around with it for usually 6 months or a year, tinkering with it, saying, well, the chicken chapter should have 30 recipes. No, maybe it should have 36, and because I want to make sure that I have these particular recipes in there. And all of that stuff it's kind of the fun part, and it's also the time-consuming part. The recipes are not, I have a style, I know how to do it. For better or worse, I'm kind of at a place where I can write a recipe, go to the stove and follow it, and it works. If I tinker a little bit and make some changes, I note them, and that's that. And then I have an independent person test them to make sure I'm not completely delusional. But we don't get 5 complaints a year. I have 15,000 recipes in print. We don't get 5 complaints a year about problems. And we look at everything we get, and sometimes there are typos, of course, and sometimes there's something tricky that we just don't get right. But I did that minimalist column for the Times. It was a recipe a week for 13 years, never missed a week. Once a month someone would say, oh, this didn't work because, I don't know, I forgot to turn my oven on or whatever. Anyway, for better or worse, I seem to be good at it. So it's working.
So with this one, did someone come to you and say, we want a grilling book, or had this been stewing for a little while, pun intended? What leads you to the next book?
Well, this is a good question because I'm going to get to do an audience survey now. There are ideas that get pushed on me. There have been ideas that get pushed on me or suggested strongly to me by the publisher, because I have obligations to the publisher because we have a symbiotic relationship. And I'm allowed to say yes or no. But grilling is something I've wanted to do it for a long time. I just didn't see that it was right until now. So the publishers wanted it for probably 10 years, and 4 or 5 years ago I said, yeah, I'm ready to do this. And I don't know what happened. I think I needed to live in the country for a while, or I think I just needed to feel like I really got it, and I do. But there are other books. So for example, the publisher's been pushing, or has pushed occasionally, How to Cook Everything Healthy. And so would you buy that? You could raise your hand if you would. That's like I'm right. I'm like, it doesn't make any sense because the word healthy is so abused, and the concept is so simple of what healthy food is, and we can talk about this or not, but it's an essay, it's not a cookbook. And the recipes are all, How to Cook Everything Healthy is embodied in every book I do. I really believe from scratch cooking is, generally speaking, healthy.
Product placement here.
They've seen it, it's fine. From scratch cooking is, generally speaking, healthy cooking, and the sort of rules about healthy cooking are well known. So then the argument would be like, well, but you would want to have a section for gluten-free people, and you'd want to have a section for diabetics, and you want to have a section for, and I'd be like, no, I don't want to have those sections. It's not where I want to go. So that's, the publisher also wanted me to redo Fish, which probably most of you don't know, but my first book was called Fish. And it was very successful for a fish cookbook, but it's really hard to talk about fish now. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. So I don't think do you mind if I do a little audience participation? Did you enjoy the audience participation we just did? I could tell you were really turned on by it. What about an Instant Pot book? Love it? Instant Pot. Oh, wait, love it? Hate it? Don't even know what I'm talking about. Let's go through this again, because everybody has to vote for this to have meaning. How to Cook Everything in an Instant Pot. Love it? You're like all together over here. Hate it? Or, mildly disinterested, whatever, okay. Don't know what I'm talking about. Okay, well, that was in the mildly disinterested part.
So if you're looking to sell 12 books, right? You're all set.
Well, wait, I have other audience participation questions.
Don't marketing companies pay like tens of thousands of dollars for this info?
Did you guys pay to get in here? I should reimburse you. Would you listen to a podcast if I were hosting it? Do you know what a podcast, no, because the other day I asked that question, I swear to God. I asked that question in Cambridge the other day. It was a very small room, it was about a third of you. And it was it just came up naturally. I don't do this all the time. It just, if it feels okay, I do it. So I said, would you listen to a podcast if I were doing a podcast? And everybody in the room raised their hand, except for this one guy who so obviously had no idea what a podcast was. So then I said, would you not listen to a podcast if I did a podcast? And the guy raises his hand. So, okay, can we do that again? Would you listen to a podcast if I were to do a podcast? It's not everyone. Would you not? If you do not, do you know what it is? Okay, last question. Sorry, Doug.
Oh, no, not at all. I'm just sort of shocked that you're the only person in the country that doesn't have a podcast.
Right. We, We're on hiatus. We couldn't raise any money, so now we're going to do it again I guess we're going to do, when I say with our money, I mean with my money. But it's actually pretty expensive because there's studio time, and if you want to do a really good job, you have to not only line up, Ted Danson, for example, who's really good on fish and everybody loves him. You have to go to LA to talk to Ted Danson. So, radio's it's not free. It's not as expensive as TV, but it's not free. So there's that. But here's something that is almost free that I want to ask you about, and is if I solicited your email address for a newsletter that was mostly just at least it started what to cook tonight kind of thing. I don't like what the New York Times does, but it's okay. We're blood related in a way. Would you subscribe to this newsletter? Would you think it was a pain in the ass? Okay, great, good, okay, thank you. I owe you all big. When you want your book signed and you ask me for a selfie with you, I'll say yes.
I think you owe.
That's the trade I owe, right?
So, have you gone to your publisher with a book idea and they said absolutely not?
Well, I have very interesting stories about that because I've written over 20 cookbooks, and my first book was published in 1994, so I probably signed that contract in 91. Since 1994, since that first book, that can't be, sorry. Since 1990.
Would you like a calendar by any chance?
It's just I want to be precise, but I'm not going to be precise. Since mid-90s, I went to the first they asked me to do How to Cook Everything, which is also a pretty interesting story, and of course I said yes. And then I said to them, I want to do this book with Jean-Georges Vongerichten, and I want to do a book based on my Times column, The Minimalist. And they said, no, we don't want those books. So I went to another publisher, and then they were like, what are you doing? And I'm like, you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to do that.
When they turn it down.
You can't play for two sports teams at the same time, but you can.
In the same sport.
In the same sport, right? But you can do this. So if you have an option, and they have an option, and you say to them, do you want How to Cook Everything Healthy? And they say no, you could then bring that to someone else. But not the How to Cook Everything part, because that's shared with this publisher. So I've had this How to Cook Everything publisher in many guises, because the publishing industry is in turmoil and always has been. So I've had the same publisher for many years, over 20 years. And they've done all the How to Cook Everything books. But there have been a lot of books that I've done: Food Matters, VB6, Bone to Pick, the Jean-Georges books, Best Recipes in the World, which is the best cookbook I ever did that didn't sell anything. All the non-How to Cook Everything titles have been published by other publishers than the How to Cook Everything. So there have been times I've been unsuccessful in selling books to one publisher and sold them to another. At this point, if I believe in something, I'll find the publisher. But the other thing is, they're not stupid people, or they're not all stupid people, so you have to pay attention, because they have, their jobs are at stake. They have to sell these things. And so if they say no, especially to an author with a track record, they have some kind of reason for that. And if two publishers say no, then you're looking at a situation where you might not want to push much further, because you could be wrong. And I am telling you that doing books that don't sell is a big drag. It's a big drag. So it's as I said before, it's a symbiotic relationship. I do respect them and listen to them. So
is it also a sort of a cyclical thing, in that an idea you may have had 10, 12, 15 years ago that wouldn't fly is now something you could bring back that publishers would be much more interested or itching for?
I mean, the answer is for sure, and I think it goes back to what's the right time for this, and is it right for me to do it, and so on. And the response to this grilling book has been really terrific. And I've been on book tour too many times to count, and I can tell when people like a book and are excited about it and so on, or when they're like sort of indifferent. And I think this was the right time for this, but we both danced around it for quite a while. I don't know whether that was a mistake or that our timing is good. I mean, it seems like our timing is good, but maybe it would have been better 5 years ago or 5 years from now. I don't know.
Do you have any idea why now? Like why it, as opposed to something that came 5 years ago?
I felt ready. So that's the only aspects of it that I had control over, I felt good about. The other thing is I think that this new format, which we released How to Cook Everything Vegetarian in this, what I keep calling streamlined format of only 1,000 recipes, I think it's better than, I think, the original How to Cook Everything book came out in 98, and it was literally 2,000 recipes. It was massive. It had illustrations, no photographs. It was the right time for that book. But I wouldn't want to be putting it out now in that form.
I can't imagine putting together that book. And I love that book because I use it sometimes more recipe inspiration as opposed to following the recipes, and certainly as a reference book.
Right.
Timing, preparation. There's still times I have artichokes and just like,
yeah,
how
me too. I use it also. And I'm not even, I'm not kidding. I use it too.
No, it's a terrific book.
So there'll be 5 people in this audience who bring their virtually unbound yellow copy of How to Cook Everything with pages falling out and stickies and stuff, and those are a pleasure. Those are a pleasure to see. Hold them up. There you go.
Yeah, exactly. No, absolutely. Well, let's talk about this book a little bit, I suppose we should. A couple things, and it's not, I don't really care, but as a Chicagoan, if I don't mention the part where you don't mention yellow mustard for the Chicago dog and you use ketchup for serving as part of your recipe, see? Sorry, I know.
To me, yellow mustard is a travesty. It should be like made illegal.
Well, now we're going to jump a couple questions other than yellow mustard. Are there other foods that you like absolutely
Are there other mistakes in this book other than yellow mustard?
Exactly. Are there other foods that you like put in here that you'll deal with, but you just don't really care for?
I think there are some. I'm thinking about this, and I think a lot of it is condiments. That there are condiments that I really don't like yellow mustard. But okay, that actually has to do with my mother. But I'm not that crazy about ketchup. And when someone asks for steak sauce at a table, it really just gives me the willies. And I think it's that kind of syrupy, even balsamic vinegar, which I use and I know has become popular. And, the original aceto balsamico is a legitimate ingredient, but the balsamic vinegar we use is kind of like Coke. Right. So I like lemon, and I like soy sauce. I like Parmesan cheese. I like real vinegar. I like that kind of stuff. There's a lot of finishing things, condiments, I just could live without. Barbecue sauce, disgusting. Like the stuff in bottles I'm talking about.
I'm not going to disagree with that. For me, it's raisins. Just one of those things like raisins.
Well, you just don't like raisins, but there's nothing
raisins.
Wrong with raisins. You just don't like them.
They're
dried grapes.
They're dried. I understand, and I like grapes, and I like wine. And sure, if it's just raisins, like raisins and noodlekugel, that just wrecks them.
Oh yeah, I agree.
Okay,
I agree.
Thank you. Oh.
They get that kind of metallic.
And it's the texture's
the way they
wrong,
pop is wrong. I agree.
And you don't get them in every bite, and it's just it's completely wrong.
I agree.
So
but my mother is playing a large part in this conversation. Puts canned pineapple in noodlekugel, which I find also repellent.
That's tough.
My sister now does this. This is live streamed. God. My sister's capable of watching this. Anyway, my sister makes, it's a slippery slope, but makes noodle kugel that's so sweet that it is like, to me, it's too sweet for dessert, and she serves it in the middle of the meal.
But again, it's those, it's that classic, that's what you grew up with, so you think it's the best. It's the best.
I seem to have changed. My tastes have changed.
Changed over the time. But it's like pizza, for instance. Everybody, New York pizza is the best. New Haven's the best. And Chicago is the best, so they're all wrong. When putting the book together, and I assume you've been grilling for a long time, is there anything new that you learned?
I think there's stuff. This book is 18 months old, right? I finished it a year and a half ago. There's stuff I do differently now. And that's what I mean about the time and place and person. I have changed techniques on some of the stuff that's in this book since I wrote it. I can't really apologize for that. They work the way that I did them, but I'm looking through the book and I'm thinking, I remember thinking that there was a better way to do that. I'm not going to get specific. Don't even ask.
I'm not. I am not.
What failed recipes are in here?
Just
besides the Chicago hot dog.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll get back to that in a minute. You talk a little bit about grilling accessories, and it is those of us who like to cook are always enamored and sort of appalled in stores by the number of accessories. Are there any that, obviously there are some basics that you need to have. Are there any that you see and that people buy that you are just flabbergasted that people would spend money on?
Well, I don't support the notion of $3,000 grills to start with. And I do think that mostly what you need for grilling is a good pair of tongs, and those exist, and some real protection from the heat. And that stuff, the technology for heat-proof gloves and things has really improved over the last few years. And I think is worth spending money on, because we're building hotter fires than everybody's, like gas grills. I think most of us remember when a gas grill, you would struggle to have a steak turn gray. Like, there was no question of browning it. It was like, can I even cook the thing? And now I have a not expensive gas grill that goes to 850 degrees in 15 minutes. That's hot. That's really hot. I have a pizza oven that doesn't get much hotter than that. That's really, so, and obviously wood fires are even hotter, so like asbestos gloves or silicone gloves or really heat-proof gloves are awesome. I think almost everything else is unnecessary, so people can buy whatever they want, but, and the baskets and perforated grill pans, so now you can grill blueberries if you want to, or possibly more practically, you can grill asparagus or string beans without worrying about them falling through the grate. That's a useful tool. I can't think of anything. Instant read thermometer, useful. There's just not a lot you need.
Right. I appreciate in the book where you give kudos to gas grills as well, because I know a lot of purists you cook over lump charcoal or nothing, or it's not.
Or wood.
Or wood. That it is, and some of us live in areas or have situations where that's not as feasible to do the charcoal.
Well, more than half the people in the United States at this point own gas grills. More than half the grills are gas grills. So it would be really insulting to tell all those people they were doing it wrong. But I'll dwell on this a little bit because it's a thing everybody cares about, I think. First of all, I do believe that cooking is a compromise in every instance, that you never have the right tool or the right ingredient or the right skill, and I'm talking about myself as well as everybody else, the right knowledge. There's always something, enough time. There's always something you feel is going wrong or you feel uptight about when you're in the kitchen. And I think that's a place to start to think about cooking, that it's rare that you turn out something that's perfect, that you think it's perfect, that you felt great about it the whole way through. But between that perfection and failure, there's a big spectrum, and most things I think are successful. So that's how I feel about cooking. So given that you're always compromising, the ideal situation is a really nice grill with an optional cover in which you can build a massive wood fire. And then let that fire die down and mess with the coals and even have a backup fire somewhere so you can add more coals as you need them. And if you can do that, you can do like the best grilling there is. But that's a hour-plus project and not within everybody's capabilities or even desires. So then you have lump charcoal, which is much faster but has some disadvantages in that it gets very hot very quickly and very cool very quickly, and also needs kind of a backup fire if you're going to do any kind of long-term grilling. And then you have gas, which purists, I had a very friendly conversation with a chef the other night in Nashville, and he basically said, I believe that everybody should be cooking over wood all the time. And I said, it's just not practical. And gas is eminently practical. You turn it on and it's ready. And you can take a few sticks of wood or a small log or whatever and put it over one of the gas burners, and then you have a wood fire in your gas grill, which is pretty good. Like, it makes a compromise even less of a compromise. I'm in favor of what gets people to cook. So I think gas grills and they have come a long way. I think they're really good. And I have both. I have one of those weird Brinkmans that's basically a half oil drum with the other half as a cover with a little smoking thing on the side that I use for wood. I never use lump charcoal. I either use wood or I use gas. Because it's like, why mess around? Either I'm going to spend a long time doing this or I want to get it done. So,
well, it sort of begs the question then, if you're cooking, a steak on the grill, that big a difference between the two? Do you, if you were a blind taste test, would it be different enough that you would say, I would not eat?
I don't think I'd build a wood fire for a steak. That's exactly the point. I think there is a difference, and I do almost never turn on the gas grill anymore without putting some wood in there, because I think that makes a difference. It really does make it better. But I'm not going to build a wood fire to cook for 10 minutes. It's just not happening. Because if I'm cooking for 10 minutes, then the gas grill means that I can start to finish in half an hour, including heating the grill. So, one thing I do want to say this about this book, because I realized it when I realized it on book tour, because you wind up looking at, as I said, to me this book is 18 months old. You wind up looking at it with fresh eyes, and I think one goal I have had in this book was to have people be able to see that you kind of can grill everything, or you kind of can grill anything. And once the grill is on, you might as well be thinking about 2 or 3 things instead of just one thing. And so there's a lot of recipes in here for vegetables, which, okay, nothing new about that, but some of them are, I think. And there's recipes also for fruit and for desserts and for breads, and some of those recipes are among my favorites in the book. So I think, to the extent that whether you build a wood fire, charcoal fire, or you do a gas grill, the minimum surface you have is really as big as your cooking surface on your stove. For most of us, you can easily cook 2 or 3 things at once. And again, with gas grills, you can have these zones of heat that you vary like this so easily that I think that our great grandmothers, some of our great grandmothers, I have no evidence for this, but it has to be true, had this same debate about when gas stoves came out. We're like, well, we're going to give up a wood stove to have this thing in the kitchen that we don't even understand the fuel, and it's going to taste, it's got that weird smell and it's going to taste weird. And then they realized that instead of building a fire, they were doing this. It's like, I guess we're going to do that.
any sort of grilling tips, any things that you came across that you didn't think were intuitive that a lot of us are missing, or that some?
Well, I think beginners, I think all of us when we start grilling, certainly this was true of me, you just dump a half a bag of briquettes into a grill and you build this wicked hot fire, and you're impatient because it just took 30 minutes for the coals to get white, and we all remember the days of lighter fluid and all of this stuff that made it a complete hassle. And so you eagerly put your food on this way too hot fire and then incinerate it. And there weren't covers, or if there were, we didn't really know how to use them, and we didn't understand the difference between direct and indirect heat and so on. I think learning those, there are some basics here, and I think, needless to say, in my typical fashion, I over-explain them in the book. I think they're worth learning. The mistake that most people make is overcooking stuff, which goes hand in hand with high heat, but it also goes with this weird paranoia about how undercooked food is going to kill you. So I'm in complete favor of undercooking food until you think it's cooked, and that means learning how to judge doneness, which is something that comes best with experience, but time is a good guideline usually, and instant read thermometers are helpful. But if you're uncomfortable, I'm all in favor of taking stuff off the grill and cutting into it and seeing what's happening there and then putting it back, because you can always cook stuff more, but as every Thanksgiving demonstrates, you can't uncook that overdone turkey.
That's true. One, I think we just have a minute left before some audience questions, so I do hope you have some questions ready. I always like to ask, and it's the fun chef question. Your last meal?
The last meal that I had, or
no,
the last
if
meal?
You get one more. It can be multiple courses. It can be one particular food.
I mean, I think I'd like to.
Well,
I'm quite lucky. I really like my own cooking, which is a good thing, right? And I've been preaching this same stuff for 20 years, and I will go to my grave preaching this. You go to the store, you buy what looks good, you come home and you cook it, and that's what I would do. I know that's a cop-out, but
not at all.
It is a cop-out, but it's the real answer. So, and while I'm at the store, am I being executed or am I dying of natural causes?
These are things.
Because if I'm being executed, I'm going to go to the store and run away.
Exactly. No, I think it's more that Soylent Green, Edward G. Robinson. You get like the nice meal, and then you lie in that room and see pretty pictures, and then the lights go on and you're done.
So I'm being executed.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Well, then I'm definitely going to the store. Are people lining up at this microphone, or are microphones coming to them in the audience?
We've got a couple of microphones. Just raise your hand, and we'll circulate mics. Coming over here.
It would help me if you stood up, because we won't see you otherwise.
Hi, I live in a high-rise, and I've been worried about how to keep a grill sanitary when you're sharing with so many people. Do you have any tips? Is it high heat?
Well, I think before you cook, you turn everything as high as you want. You close the lid, you wait 5 minutes, you scrape it off. It's sterile.
Okay.
I mean, guaranteed. I say this often, actually. That's not what's going to kill you. It's going to be the Soylent Green Edward G. Robinson thing.
Hi, I grill frequently at home. I have a 22-inch kettle grill, and my wife and I were talking. Do you know of any place that could manufacture or sells a half 22 cast iron plate you could put
Such a good idea.
It'd be perfect. You could do burgers, you could do corn on one side.
So like a
Let me
yeah.
I know the people at Lodge, and they're actually very receptive to good ideas. I think that's an awesome idea. So we'll exchange emails or something afterwards. Okay, right. Well, maybe they'll name it after you. Maybe you can just sell the idea to
That's right, it's another
retire.
$100 idea.
It is at least a $100 idea.
Raise those hands.
Hands. There's someone in the very front row.
Hello. So when you're in a rush and you're making a very quick meal, like a sandwich or something, take say like 10 minutes or less, start to finish, what is your go-to?
When I want to make something that takes 10 minutes? I mean, you could cook a lot of stuff in 10 minutes. It's not, there's a hilarious, I guess I'm just not going to answer this question, but I mean, you could cook a steak in 10 minutes. You can make a tuna fish sandwich in 10 minutes. I mean, what do I like? I think I probably would just spend 20 minutes, actually, and then have 3 times as many options. But there's this hilarious cookbook, highly recommended, by this French guy named Edouard de Pomein. It's called French Cooking in 10 Minutes. There isn't a single 10-minute recipe in the book. But it's hilarious because it's like the kind of thing where it says, well, he says, walk into the kitchen, but he has all these great rules, like walk into the kitchen and set a pot of water to boil. I don't know what you're going to use it for, but you're going to use it for something. That's really smart. It also, like when chefs go in the kitchen, they just start throwing pots on the stove and turning the heat on them because you're going to use them. So that's a good rule. But his recipes are all like, take tomato sauce. Well, yeah, okay, but I didn't have tomato sauce. So
basically just have a pot of water boiling at all times in your house, you'll be fine.
Pot of water boiling and a saute pan getting hot, or the grill, first thing you do is turn on the heat. I don't have the microphone.
Are you finished?
There you go, yeah.
Okay, so when I heard you were going to leave the New York Times and become a vegetarian, this cookbook kind of threw me for a loop. I thought you were off the meat.
What's your question?
Weren't you going to be focusing on vegetarian lifestyle?
No, I left for a number of reasons, but when I left, I joined a vegan meal kit company, a vegan meal kit startup, which I stayed with for 6 months, and it was kind of a mistake. But it was I learned a lot about startups, which was an interesting thing.
How you doing? My question is about when you're making like stews or some kind of meat. Like, what's the meat you recommend, and what's the key to making sure it doesn't dry out like over time when you have something that's like 3 hours?
Well, you want untender meat that's going to get tender over 3 hours, and that tends to be meat that's very has a lot of connective tissue, usually has a fair amount of fat, and would be terrible grilled. I mean, would be terrible not cooked on it, but terrible like cooked like this. So, I mean, there's lots of cuts for many animals, but pork cheeks, pork shoulder, beef brisket, ribs from lamb or goat or pork. I mean, anything that can take long, slow cooking shouldn't be dry if it's not overcooked. But a brisket, I cooked a brisket in a pressure cooker a few weeks ago, and it still took 3.5 hours. I mean, some of these things take a long time to get tender, so just that.
Me again.
Well, why don't we let the person who hasn't asked a question yet?
Go ahead. Yep, that's you.
What are, I don't know, maybe 5, 10 of your favorite cookbooks?
I don't, this is going to sound terrible, but I don't know how to dissemble, but I don't read them so much anymore because I write them, but I can go back and tell you some favorite cookbooks.
Fair.
I mean, so I was a huge Marcella Hazan fan, and I do think she has a book that sort of combines, there's a book that sort of combines her first 2 books, and for basic Italian cooking, it's out of this world. Julie Sani's first 2 cookbooks, Classic Indian Cookery and Classic Indian Grain and Vegetable Cookery or something like that, amazing, really, really great, and completely up to like they were published in the 80s. They haven't lost a step. There's nothing better. I loved Paula Peck when I was very young. She was a sort of journalist turned cookbook author like me. The old Craig Claiborne books are very important to me. I don't know how great they are, but I like them. And I will, there were some chef books that I liked also, but they're not, Alice Waters' books are generally pretty good. That's about as, yeah, I don't have, it's like I have a lot of cookbooks still, and if I want to know, like how to get a real Iraqi feel to a beef stew or something, I'll go look, because I haven't been there and I don't trust my instincts. But it's not like I don't cook my way through cookbooks the way I did when I was young. That was a fun thing to do, though.
Do you have favorite countries to visit in?
I mean, I'm so boring. I can't, it's almost embarrassing. I really like going to Italy and France.
Likewise.
But I was just in India this winter, and I really learned a lot. And I'm actually not sure how much of it I'm going to integrate into my world, because it's just different in a way that I can enjoy, but I don't think I can become all that skilled at. I think I'm just going to be primitive in that world. I don't know. Japan, I had a lot of fun in Japan.
Anywhere you didn't, like, came back and was like,
some countries have better food than others. I will say that. And, I don't know that you want to start insulting countries, but it's me. So, let's say Canada's not as interesting as Mexico, for example. That's an insult to Canada, but even most Canadians would agree with that, I think.
What kitchen technique do you find translates best, other than patience, to grilling?
I'm not sure I understand what you're asking me. I'm sorry.
Is there a kind of chopping technique? Is there like a roasting rotisserie? Or is there, other than, just being patient and waiting and making sure everything is grilled right, translates best from the kitchen to the grill? What technique would most home cooks find most useful to transfer over to grilling?
Well, I suppose to say broiling would be cheating, because broiling is the same as grilling, because a broiler is an upside-down grill. The point of this book, and the point of this, obviously not the point of this conversation, because we haven't had any of these, we haven't touched much on grilling, but the point of this book is to say you can pretty much bring any technique to the grill, and you can even braise on the grill. That's what barbecue is. So, the grill, really a grill, thinking of grilling as a technique shortchanges it, because really a grill is an outdoor oven or an outdoor stove or both. So there's nothing you can't do, really. There's some things that aren't worth doing, but there's nothing you can't do.
What's not worth doing?
Well, I think the thing I said before, which is that once you're grilling, you should be grilling more than one thing, opens the door to grilling things that by themselves are probably not worth grilling. So I don't know that I'd build a wood fire. I'd be more likely to build a wood fire to grill or to cook cornbread in a cast iron skillet over a wood fire, because that is just amazing. I would be more likely to do that than I would be to build a wood fire for a steak, but why not do both at the same time? You don't need to build a wood fire for one, you can build a wood fire for more than one. Someone's back there.
Hi.
Will you stand up, please?
Yes, I'm sorry. I wanted to ask you a question about how you develop a recipe. How much of that recipe is yours? How much is somebody else's? And how does that all come together in a book?
I can't answer the question the way I would have answered it when I was 30, because then the recipes were largely integrations of other people's recipes. In other words, I'd try things different ways by different people and try to figure out what's mine. As I said, I don't look at cookbooks anymore. If I go to a restaurant and someone cooks something that I haven't had, I usually either conclude that it's contrived, which is why I'm bad to ask about restaurants, or that I better go figure out how to do it quick, or that it's not so good. But I now think they're all mine. Which is not to say that I would freely steal, but I do cook by opening the refrigerator or going to the store and cooking what looks good. I also cook out of guilt, like if there's something that's been in the freezer for too long, I really feel bad, so I have to cook it. Even if I don't want to cook it, it's like, oh. So that is how I cook, and frankly, I don't come up with all that much new stuff at this point. Occasionally I'll do something and surprise myself. I mean, it's different every night because I don't follow recipes unless I'm testing, but it's usually not all that different. I mean, there's only so many ways you can roast a chicken before you make it worse. You know, the goal is not to invent new recipes at the expense of making bad ones, you know? I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions. Hi.
I cook on a 2-burner Weber on my balcony, and you talked about adding wood. Now, I use thin planks when I'm doing salmon, but the effect is I wet the wood and try to create smoke. But you're talking about adding wood maybe to doing a steak. Are you also suggesting that you soak the wood to create smoke, or what?
I'm not suggesting you smoke it. I'm suggesting you build a fire on your grill. I think soaking slows things down and creates more steam than smoke. So I think you want a fire. Having said that, I don't want to set your house on fire. So you're on a balcony. If you have wood around the grill, don't do this.
Okay.
Stick to your soaked planks, which are great. So.
Hello.
Okay, can you stand up, please?
Oh.
Whoever
Hello.
just said hello?
Back
You're
there.
back there. Okay, good. See, if you hadn't stood up, I never would have seen it.
I love a turkey burger, and I want a turkey burger on the grill. I want it juicy and really good.
Well,
what do I add to it? No, come on, don't tell me I'm not allowed. No.
I mean, you can make it juicy by integrating ingredients that will stay juicy during the course of cooking. Like, you can put chopped tomatoes in the mix, you can put chopped onions in the mix, you can put cheese in the mix, you can do many things, but you can't undercook a turkey burger. That's the problem with a turkey burger. It's dry. So parsley, there's a million things you can put in there that will keep it moist, but the meat itself, you're gonna wanna cook it till it's 160 degrees, and 160 degrees is not wet. I think we're
great. I'm afraid that's all the time we have. A big round of applause for our presenters.